On a party boat, a lot of people wonder, well, why is that guy catching fish when I'm not? A lot of times it's experience. Sometimes it's just dumb luck. Party boat fishing, another benefit to it, not only do you have the camaraderie and the ability to learn from other people, but a big benefit of party boat fishing is also the chum line that's created. When you have 50, 60 people on a boat, all fishing of all different varying experience levels, you're gonna have that one guy that doesn't hook his bait right, and on the way to bottom it comes off. You're gonna have that one guy that's catching a ton of fish, and every fish he's reeling up is spitting up bait and chum on the way up. All this in unison creates what's called a chum line. And that chum line's under the water, attracting more fish to that boat. So you can picture a large party boat and all the lines going down around the perimeter of that vessel, hitting the bottom. You've created kind of a ring of fire, all this chum going down in the water, and you attract more fish to the area. So you're gonna have sometimes that dumb luck where someone just gets that one really big aggressive fish and it comes up and grabs their line. Majority of the time though, it's experience and more skill, presenting your bait naturally, holding bottom, hooking your bait properly, and once you're on the bottom, straightening out your leader so it looks natural. One of the biggest things on a party boat is when, again, picturing that boat and all those lines coming down, creating that ring. Inside that ring are going to be your aggressive, smaller fish. They're going to sit there, the lead's bouncing up and down the bottom, lines going up and down, won't bother them. They're going to sit there and they're going to peck at your bait. Bait stealers. Outside that ring is going to be your more, the large quality fish, your trophy fish. They're going to be hanging back. What the heck is going on? Trying to figure out the situation. And that big 40, 50 pound grouper or huge big trophy snapper is sitting back watching and waiting, looking for that really natural looking bait. That bait that isn't moving up and down off the bottom. That bait that's hooked naturally. That guy that's using the proper tackle. So often I'll see someone trying to target mangrove snapper and he's got an 8-ounce lead and a steel leader and 5 different glow beads on his leader. It's like, what are you doing, man? So often simple is better. And when you're rigging, especially for grouper, snapper, whatever it may be, simple is always better, because the less terminal tackle you have in the water, the more natural the bait looks. Also, holding bottom. You got a guy out there that's, I'm gonna use a bigger rod. Bigger lead will make it more easy to understand. So, if you're out there trying to hold bottom, let's say you're in a 2 or 3 foot chop, and you're just out there talking to your buddy, drinking your beer. I gotta tighten my drag here. You're out there drinking your beer, and you're not really moving your rod tip. As that boat goes up and down, that lead's bouncing off the bottom. Would you want to get anywhere near that? If your dinner plate was bouncing up and off the dinner table, would you grab your food off it? No, you'd be wondering what the heck was going on too. So it's the same thing with the fish. That lead that's sitting there naturally, and that lead that's sitting on the bottom still, with that leader stretched out and that bait hooked naturally, is going to be what's grabbed first. Also, you got to remember, as you drop down to the bottom, a lot of times your hook's going to hit the bottom and your lead's going to hit the bottom right next to it, and it's going to end up like this on the bottom. That doesn't look natural. It doesn't look appetizing. You wouldn't want to get near that either. So a lot of times what I do, especially when I'm out deep water fishing for grouper or mangrove snapper or species that are more leader shy, you go out there, and a lot of times I'll cast out. And the reason I cast out is because I want to get outside that ring of fire. So I'll underhand cast out away from the boat, and then my lead hits the bottom. When my lead hits the bottom, what a lot of times I'll do is I'll lift my rod tip up real slowly and drop that lead back to bottom. Now, for those of you guys in the front, you can see how much that line is straight. What that does is, as you lift up your lead from the bottom at an angle, it straightens your lead out. So now your lead's sitting on the bottom, your leader's perfectly straight, and that bait is as far away from that bouncing lead as possible. That way, if your lead does bounce up and off the bottom at all, or moves and disturbs the sand at all, that bait is further away. So that fish is less likely to get disturbed or spooked. So that's another technique that I use. A lot of times what I'll do is not only will I cast out, but I'll wait a few seconds. A lot of times when you're the first one down, or when you cast it out away from the spot and you're the first one in that area, you'll have that really big aggressive mango ready to come up and bite that bait. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to lift up and straighten up your leader too quickly, because sometimes you'll be pulling that bait away from that world record porgy or whatever it may be. So you never know. And I always try to be patient. When my line hits the bottom, count to 40, 60 seconds, and then straighten out my leader.
That technique change if you use a live bait versus
what he's asking is, does the technique change if you're using live bait or dead bait? Which is a great question. A lot of times it will change. For example, it depends on how your bait's hooked. If I'm fishing for amberjack, I'm going to be using a larger bait with a longer leader, a heavier lead, and I'm going to be hooking that bait in the top of its head or the back of its anal fin, and that bait's going to be swimming away. So as that bait falls to bottom and that bait's struggling up, watch what happens to my lead. My lead gets away from my swivel. So every now and again on the way down, what I do is I'll stop my spool, my thumb, so that way my lead can fall down my line and catch up to my swivel. Because that big bait that you have hooked is swimming up away from it. When you're dead bait fishing, that isn't a problem, because that lead's falling down with it. If you hooked your bait properly, it's not spinning, so that lead's staying right on the swivel. So if you have a big bait, you're stopping it occasionally, and a lot of times once you've hit the bottom, you don't have to lift your lead up, because your live bait's going to stretch your leader out for you. So yes, it does change. I primarily start with dead bait. Brings me to a good point. When you get to an area, especially on a smaller charter boat, if you're fishing a small boat, just a few of your friends, and you don't have that benefit of a party boat with a lot of lines in the water and a lot of chum in the water, I like to start with dead bait. You get the smell in the water, you get that smell going, a few smaller snapper and stuff come up and chew on that bait. It gets the smell released in the area, gets the fish excited, and then that's when you drop down that pinfish. Same thing for hogfish. You're using the dead bait to start, you're getting those fish thinned out, those more aggressive snapper, those more aggressive mangoes, porgies, gray snappers, sea bass. You're getting them thinned out, you're catching a few of them. When the bite starts to slow down, that's when you fire down that live shrimp on lighter tackle. Same thing for grouper. When you start fishing, everybody starts with dead bait, gets those smaller fish excited. That's when that big old gag grouper's wandering out from under the ledge like, what's going on, fellas? What's going on out here? And that's when he's ready to chew. And that's when you fire down that big bait on that bigger tackle. Good question. Any other questions?
I've noticed on a lot of the charters, this way with you guys as well, is the back of the boat always lines up first. Statistically speaking, as you've watched these charters, is there an advantage truly being in the back of the boat, or really not that much when you're on the ring of fire?
Well, what he's asking is there advantage to the back of the boat? Is the back of the boat the best place to fish? In my opinion, there is absolutely no advantage to the back of the boat. The reason why, statistically speaking, the back of the boat catches more fish is because generally the back of the boat, at most party boat companies, you have to reserve your spot when you book your trip. So the guy that goes fishing 20 times a year, like Omar, who calls me every day he can, at 6 o'clock in the morning, if he's fishing all the time, he's going to call and he's going to book his trip 6 months out. So if he's booking his trip 6 months out, where is he going to be able to book? Anywhere he wants. So he's going to pick the back corners. Because you can always move away from your back of the boat, but if the back of the boat's full, you can't move back there. So a lot of the experienced anglers book early, and they book the back of the boat because in case the bite is back there, they can move back there because that's their assigned spot. If the bite's open in the front of the boat and there's open spots to move, you can always move up front. So generally, the back of the boat has more experienced anglers. That is generally why the back of the boat catches more fish. Not because the back of the boat's better, not for any other reason. Now, back in the day, in the 60s, 70s, 90s, the back of the boat might have been a better spot to fish because back then, boats had their sonars, their bottom machines, their transducers were in the stern of the vessel. Nowadays, that doesn't hold true. Nowadays, there's through holes. 90% of commercial and recreational fishing vessels have their transducers in the middle of the boat. No one has the transducer hanging off the stern anymore. That just doesn't happen, especially on these faster boats. These fast boats that go 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, you can't have a transducer hanging off the stern. That thing would fly off. They're all through holes and they're all flush mounted to the bottom of the vessel in the center of the vessel. That way when the captain puts the boat over fish, he's putting the center of the boat over fish. So where would you want to fish? Center of the boat. Generally what I do when I go out fishing is I fish towards the front on either side. Because generally someone's either going to want the back of the boat or they're going to want the front of the boat. And we always get these random gaps on the side of the boat. And that's generally where I end up fishing. And I would like to think I'm pretty good at fishing, and I like to think that I catch a few fish. So it doesn't really matter where you fish. In my opinion, the sides of the boat where there's the most room around you is the best. And a lot of times on any boat I go out on, even when I go up to New Jersey, I go down and fish Key West in Venice, Louisiana, I generally fish around the wheelhouse because that's towards the front of the boat on either side. And generally you have a chance to talk to the captain and crew. You get to hear a little bit more about what's going on. And generally you have a leg up on everybody else in the boat because you're hearing what's going on. The captain might be talking to the deckhand saying, "You swung off the spot, it's over there a little ways." Oh, okay. You know? So generally I like to fish up and around the wheelhouse just for that reason. But that's a good question. One time, in certain cases, the stern is the best place. The only time that holds true is when you're party boat fishing, you've been soaking a spot for a really long time, and the wind and the current are coming in the same direction. What happens then is the boat lines up straight on the anchor, the current's coming straight down the boat. If you've been soaking a spot for 3 hours, there's a ton of chum in the water. That means the snapper, all the pelagics are swimming right up the stern. But how often does the wind and the current go in the same direction, and how often is fishing good enough to soak the spot for a long time? It's not very often. So generally, it doesn't hold.